Hey freedom fighters, how's it going? This is Kala here at Students for Free Tibet International Headquarters, bringing you SFT TV. SFT TV is your source for news, information, and updates from SFT HQ right here in New York City. Today we have some pretty disturbing news up ahead for you, and just to give some context about this really crazy verdict. Many of you have already heard about the case of Runggye Adak. He's a Tibetan man from Litang in eastern Tibet that was arrested in August for calling for the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And after his arrest, there were protests in Litang, and the authorities instituted more patriotic re-education programs and even some more severe crackdown inside eastern Tibet. And this report is from the Associated Press, Beijing. The headline is, Tibetan gets 8 years for Anti-China Act. A Chinese court on Tuesday sentenced a Tibetan nomad to 8 years in prison for seeking Tibetan independence after he urged a crowd to proclaim loyalty to the Dalai Lama, state news agency said. Runggye Adak was convicted of subversion earlier this month after taking the stage at a horse racing festival in August to call for the exiled Buddhist leader's return. Chinese army and government officials seated nearby sat dumbfounded as the 52-year-old whipped up the largely Tibetan crowd in the traditionally Tibetan town of Litang in western Sichuan province with shouts of, quote, "Long live the Dalai Lama." Officers were forced to fire warning shots to disperse a crowd that gathered outside the local jail to demand the man's release. The defendant, quote, undermined national unity, leading to protests that local government leading to protests at local government offices because people, quote, people were not clear about the truth, end quote, the Xinhua news agency said, citing the verdict by the Gansi, Tibetan Khartse, Autonomous Prefecture, Intermediate People's Court. In a separate report, Xinhua said the Khartse court also sentenced 3 other Tibetans to prison terms of 3 to 10 years Tuesday on charges that they were, quote, spying for overseas organizations, end quote, and trying to split Tibet from China. The verdict said that foreign groups told the 3, identified as Lupa, Kunken, and Lutok, to take photographs that threatened China's security and interests, Xinhua reported. All 3 pleaded guilty, the report said. Lupa received 10 years in prison, Kunken was sentenced to 9, and Lutok was given 3, it said. Definitely keep abreast of more information and the current campaign we have coming up with our December 10th International Day of Action. For more information, please check out the Students for Free Tibet website at www.studentsforfreetibet.org. If you're interested in organizing your own protest in your city, please let me know and shoot me an email at Kala, that's Kala, at studentsforfreetibet.org. Once again, the protest that's coming up is on December 10th, and we'll have more materials, information, resources for all of you who would like to plan your own protest. And now we'll turn over to our new correspondent, no longer a guest correspondent, Kun-sang.
Hi everybody, this is Kun-sang. I just wanted to share a few notes on today's news. I know Kala has already updated you on the status of Runggye Adak, but I wanted to read you this statement from the Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy, as well as introduce our feature of the week on colonization. So go right into the press release. Runggye Adak and others sentenced to lengthy prison terms between 3 to 10 years. The Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy expresses its deepest shock and condemnation over the swift and extremely harsh sentence to Runggye Adak and 3 other Tibetans by Khartse Intermediate People's Court today. Runggye Adak, who was earlier indicted by the Khartse Intermediate People's Court on October 29th on 4 counts of crimes, ranging from the disruption of law and order to state subversion, and was sentenced to 8 years of imprisonment with deprivation of political rights for 4 years. He was also arrested with 3 other men, Adak Lopo, who received 10 years, Kunken or Jamchang Gonkien, who received 9 years, and Lotok, who received 3 years imprisonment, according to information received by the Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy. I'm sure that many of you remember when his story first broke in the beginning of August, around the same time that Laden was in Beijing. We had heard about this man who went on stage in front of thousands of people, Tibetans and Chinese military, during one of these huge horse festivals that happen every summer in Litang, and demanded that His Holiness be allowed to return to Tibet. And after he was arrested, hundreds and hundreds of people showed up to demand his release. And the Chinese military showed up in their full combat gear and threw tear gas at them and started shooting, into the air and at the crowd. And we thought that was a really amazing example of bravery and courage of people inside of Tibet. But it also shows that despite what China is trying to show the world, how they've changed, they haven't. They haven't changed at all. So it's not surprising. The other thing I want to talk about is this new installment from the Beijing International Dance Season, which is called The Mystery of Tibet. The Mystery of Tibet is a dance performance by a Chinese artist who basically has done an amazing job of colonizing Tibetan culture. I probably have not seen such a racist, colonist, disgusting example of stealing people's culture in art, in dance, in a very long time. And, it touches upon mysticism and hypersexualization of Tibetan women, Asian women, and exotification of Tibetan culture. And I will be going into this more this week, now that it is Thanksgiving and, in light of the colonial holidays. And Kyle and I are going to go into a deeper analysis of this because we think it's important. So stay tuned, and I'll see you then.
Thank you so much, Kunsang, for that very interesting analysis on the colonization of Tibetan culture by the Chinese. And just to rehash, colonization takes mainly two forms. One is physical colonization, such as the railroad going into Tibet, bringing in more Chinese, and mental colonization, which is the co-optation of Tibetan culture by the Chinese, and the repression of acts of spirituality or religion, like banning Sangso ceremonies. So you'll definitely be hearing more information and reports about decolonization and how that is related to the Tibetan freedom movement. So just to touch on one thing, many of you probably are wondering what's going to happen with peace in Momo, Greece. The final tally as of today was 18 for peace in Momo, Greece, and 8 for other. And we can easily just keep it to peace in Momo, Greece, but in an act of goodwill, I'd like to ask for those who would like to see an alternative to provide an alternative, because it's great to be critical and, of course, be constructive about your criticism, but not just to call out what's wrong, but to provide something that would be a suitable alternative. And if at that point that doesn't satisfy you, you can always change the channel. You definitely wouldn't want to lose any viewers, but we understand that you have to keep with your principles. So In the meantime, folks, we'll see you later, and peace and Momo grease.
No, we gon' get Olympic, something chick, look a chick, run, say, a chick, each chick, not so near to jump, near to leg a chick, Japa Magica leg up.